morning, good afternoon, good evening. In April 2022, I was invited by Urian Voters Education event hosted by Father Saturnino Rios University tungkol sa current state of the Philippine economy and the leaders we need. And so, ang pinisend ko is what I would call the PiTiK sa UTaK test. What's PiTiK sa UTaK test? Well, the PiTiK concept is something that I adopted from a colleague from Ateneo, former Director General of NEDA, which is Shell Habito. That is, he said to me, he told to us 20 years ago when we joined him, when he present to people in his time in government and so on, people are most interested in basically the Presyo, which stands for the PiTiK, Trabaho, at kita, or Presyo, which expressed in inflation, Trabaho, which is expressed in unemployment, at kita, usually expressed in the gross domestic product growth. So tignan natin ang PiTiK. Pisa natin sa presyo or inflation. Inflation historically, the shocks are usually externally driven or supply side. For example, yung first oil crisis in 1972, wala tayong magagawa. That's outside of the Philippines. The second oil crisis, that's OPEC driven. Wala rin tayong magagawa dito. However, in the 1980s, we had the Philippine debt crisis. Makikita nyo, it's in color blue, and I did it because it is self-inflicting. Kasalanan natin in a sense kung bakit tayo nagkaroon ng Philippine debt crisis. Yung susunod doon, yung global recession and the Kuwait invasion, sometime in 1991, tumaas yung presyo ng mga ng langis. Then yung Asian financial crisis and El Nino of 1998. At again, tumaas ulit yung Iraq War and color blue in VAT nung nagtaas tayo ng value-added tax during the time of President Arroyo. And of course, you have the global financial crisis, the 2008 financial crisis na nagsimula sa Wall Street, sa New York, sa United States. This is self-inflicting. Panahon ni President Duterte, nagkaroon tayo ng shortage ng rice. Nagkaroon tayo ng African swine fever. It is in blue kasi something avoidable yun. Kaya natin iwasan. And of course, there is the Ukraine that is upcoming. But now it's at inflation is 3.4%. Makita mo that also, for every administration, inflation have been milder. For example, nung panahon ni Marcos, ang inflation, pagtaas ng presyo, ang average is 16.2%. Tandaan po natin, ang inflation ngayon ay 3.4% at marami nang nagrereklamo sa pagtaas ng presyo, lalo na dahil sa digmaan sa Ukraine. So 3.4 ngayon, pero imagine mo kung 16.2% ang inflation. Bumaba siya ng konti nung panahon ni President Corazon Aquino to 11.9%. Then 7.8% nung panahon ni President Ramos, 4.4% ang average nung panahon ni President Arroyo, at napababa natin to 2.7% nung panahon ni President Benigno Aquino, at tumaas ng konti dahil nga sa African swine fever at medyo COVID na rin. At ngayon, average 3.4% under President Duterte. Yung extremes have also become less. So panahon po ni Marcos, pumalo siya ng kasing baba ng mga 8%, pero pumalo rin siya na kasing taas ng more than 50%. Again, 3.4% ang pagtaas ng presyo ngayon, at makikita natin, nararamdaman natin, marami nagrereklamo sa pagtaas ng presyo. Paano pa kaya kung 50%? Nung panahon ni President Corazon Aquino, Ang pinakamataas, almost 20%, at pinakamababa is almost is zero. Nung panahon ni President Ramos, ay na po ang extremes, makikita natin sa video, sa PowerPoint presentation. Ito po yung panahon ni President Arroyo. President Aquino bumaba. At ito po ang panahon ni President Duterte. That's the extremes. So ayun po yung PiTiK presyo. Now punta na po tayo sa trabaho, the letter T of PiTiK, which is employment. Makikita natin that on average, President Estrada had the worst record in terms of unemployment. Ito siya yung letter blue dito, pinakamataas, close to 11% unemployment. Marcos had the best record in terms of unemployment. Ito pong kulay green. So sa lahat ng naging presidente na nandito, kay President Ramos, Marcos ang pinakamababang unemployment. And then the end of Marcos was the beginning of 15 years of close to 10% unemployment. So yung unemployment po, panahon ni Marcos, less than 6%. Biglang nagkaroon tayo ng 15 years ng inflation, ang unemployment ay mataas, close to 10%. Ayun na po ang trabaho. So nakikita natin in terms of unemployment, it seems that President Marcos administration, we were at best in terms of unemployment nung panahon ni President Marcos. Pag tinignan po natin sa letter K ng salitang ng PiTiK test, Duterte had the worst in terms of growth or the worst contraction in 70 years. Ito po siya noong 2020. Quirino had the best record in terms of growth, more than 8%. Madali pong lumago kung galing po kayo sa gera. For example, kung 1 ka lang, magiging 2, that's 100% increase. Pero kung 100 ka, magiging 101, only 1% increase lang yun. Still, the worst recession lasting for 2 years in the past 70 years was with President Marcos. 2 consecutive years of recession, somewhere between 7%, negative 7% growth in 2 years. Still, kung i-average natin, kasi si President Marcos po ay nagsimula 1965 to 1986, whereas President Corazon Aquino was from 1986 to 1992, mas mataas pa rin po ang average na GDP growth or kita, paglago ng kita ni President Marcos kaysa President Corazon Aquino. So kung sa PiTiK test lang, makikita natin sa kung presyong pag-uusapan, talo po pinakamasama po ng panahon ng President Marcos. Pero kung pag-uusapan po ay trabaho at kita, hindi naman po ganun kasama. In fact, hindi naman, it's not so bad. It's nothing extraordinarily bad as to cause some alarm in that sense. Pero paano kung subukan natin yung UTaK test in a historical perspective? UTaK test is medyo na-invento ko is paano kung ginawa natin yung pag-isipan natin yung utang or debt, and then also trabaho at kita. At nakita naman natin sa trabaho at kita, hindi naman nothing extraordinarily bad happened during the Marcos era. Pero kung utang ang pag-uusapan, tingnan muna natin yung nominal na utang natin. This is external debt only, hindi utang sa Pilipino, pero utang in foreign currency. Panahon ni Marcos, nagsimula tayo sa Pilipinas ng 13 billion pesos of debt. At noong 1986, tumaas siya to 496 billion pesos. Nung pumasok po si Aquino, the debt, yung utang natin, almost doubled to 893 billion pesos. Panahon ni Ramos, dumoble pa lalo, naging 2.2 trillion pesos. At kay panahon ni President Arroyo, it's mild increase from 2.6 trillion naging 2.9 trillion. Ito po yung panahon ni Arroyo. And then during President Benigno Aquino years, the debt increased from 2.9 trillion to 3.5 trillion. And Duterte, as of now, we have 4.3 trillion pesos worth of external debt, external nominal debt. Kaya pag sinabi nating nominal, hindi natin makukumpara masyado yung mga prices. Ang dahilan doon ay ang presyo ng bigas noong 1970 ay ibang-iba sa presyo ng bigas sa panahon ngayon. Kaya sabihin mo mas maliit ang utang mo noong 1970 kung mas mura naman ang bilihin, kung tutuusin, malaki pa rin yung utang. Or sabihin ba natin na 4.3 trillion ang debt natin ngayon, ang utang natin ngayon, pero kung mura naman ang bilihin, then hindi na. So ang ginagawa ho natin, pinapantay natin ngayon. Gagawin natin, ipe-presyo natin lahat in terms of 2018. So tinatawag na base case scenario of 2018. Kung lahat ipinesyo natin in terms of 2018, si Marcos started with 1 trillion pesos of debt. Kung nasa 2018 tayo, kung ang katumbas nun ay 1 trillion, pero tumaas to 3.7 trillion when he left office. Nung panahon ni President Aquino, yung 3.7 trillion pesos naging 3.7 trillion na bawasan to 3 trillion pesos. Panahon ni Ramos, President Ramos, 3 trillion naging 5.1 trillion. Okay, we needed to borrow a lot because of the Asian financial crisis that was necessary to save our economy. Nung panahon ni President Estrada hanggang panahon ni President Arroyo, so 12 years yon, yung 5.1 trillion bumaba to 3.7 trillion. At kung kay President Aquino, Benigno Aquino, nag-steady siya to 3.7 trillion pesos. So, hindi ko na uulitin yung sa trabaho at kita kasi nakita naman natin hindi naman masama masyado ang nangyari nung panahon ni Marcos. In fact, baka nga mas maganda kung pag-usapan natin na ay trabaho at kita. Pero sa utang medyo halo-halo, mahalo pa ang ebidensya. Ngayon, paano what if we use what I would refer to as PiTiK sa utang? PiTiK sa utang in a sense that medyo complicating, gawin naman natin komplikado ang ating pag-iisip, palalimin natin ng konti. Kaya konting PiTiK sa utak, baka makita natin mas malinaw kung how we can compare the administrators per se. Itong nasa vertical axis, ito po yung tinatawag na PiTiK test or Presyo, Trabaho, Kita. At itong nasa taas ay tinatawag na ang tinatawag kong UTaK test, Utang, Trabaho at Kita. Paano kasi sa totoo lang, hindi natin pwede basta-basta mahiwalay yung mga variables na ito. For example, paano kung pinagsama natin yung presyo at utang? Ang dami mo nang bilihin. Kung dito lang, wala kang utang, ang mahal naman ng bilihin. O kaya, mura naman ang bilihin, pero ang laki naman ng utang mo. O paano kung ikumpara natin yung presyo at trabaho? Mababa nga ang presyo, wala ka naman trabaho. O may trabaho ka nga, pero ang mahal-mahal naman ng mga bilihin. Or punta tayo kay presyo kita. Mura nga ang bilihin, wala ka namang kita. May kita ka nga, ang mahal naman ng bilihin. O paano kung ipagsama natin yung utang at trabaho? May trabaho ka nga, pero yung trabaho mo naman parang pangbayad lang ng utang. O wala kang utang, pero wala ka rin trabaho. O paano yung kita at trabaho at kita? Pareho lang po yun. Malaki ang kinikita ng ekonomiya natin, pero ikaw mismo wala kang trabaho. O may trabaho ka nga, ang liit naman ng sweldo mo. At ang huling-huli ay yung kita at utang. Wala kang kita, wala ka ning utang. O may kita ka nga, ang dami mo naman utang. So in that sense, if we go to the first one, which is presyo at presyo at utang, or inflation and real debt na pinakita na natin before, nung panahon po ni Marcos, inflation was once again average 16.2%. And then the debt was 3.7 trillion pesos. Nung panahon po ni President Corazon Aquino, bumaba ang utang natin, bumaba ang inflation from 11.9% inflation per year. But with the debt decreasing, nagbayad tayo ng utang, so bumaba rin yung utang natin, bumaba ang inflation, at bumaba ang utang to 3.2 trillion pesos. President Benigno Aquino ang pinakamagandang combination because inflation was lowest, so 2.7% lang ang pagtaas ng presyo, which is combined with a debt of 3.7 trillion pesos. Panahon ni President Duterte, merong tumaas ng konti ang 3.4 ng inflation to 3.4% with 4.2 trillion pesos worth of debt. So that in a sense, what we can see from this diagram is we've had 16 years of lowering inflation, bumabagal ang pagbaba ng presyo, at bumababa rin ang ating utang 16 years mula 1986 hanggang 2016. Now we go to presyo at trabaho, inflation, and unemployment. Sometimes mga experts ang tawag po dito ay the Phillips curve. Nung panahon ni Marcos, ang inflation ay 16.2%, pero ang unemployment rate pababa, 5.4%. Pero panahon po ni President Aquino, ang inflation bumaba to 11.9%, pero nag-sacrifice tayo. Tumaas naman ang unemployment. Panahon ni Marcos, kay President Ramos, 7.8%, bumaba pala uli ang presyo, pero ang unemployment mataas pa rin, 9.5%. Time of President Estrada, inflation went down by 1 percentage point to 6.8%, but unemployment rate increased by 1% to 10.5%. The time of Arroyo, inflation kept on going down, bumaba ulit, bumagal ang pagtaas ng presyo to 4.4%, pero mataas pa rin ang unemployment rate to 9%, notwithstanding bukod sa binago nila ng konti ang definition ng unemployment. President Aquino, 2.7% ang pagtaas ng presyo, pero 6.5% bumaba ng konti ang unemployment rate. And then panahon ni President Duterte, as of now, the average is 3.4% inflation, tumaas ng konti sa pagtaas ng presyo. Pero the unemployment rate on average went down to 6.3%. So that what I can say is from President Marcos to kumpara natin kay President Marcos tsaka kay President Duterte and President Pinoy, ito, kumpara natin itong puntos na to sa panahon ni Duterte at Aquino, we sacrifice 1% less employment. Yung unemployment tumaas lang ng 1%, pero nabawasan ang inflation by more than 12%, from 16.2 naging 3.4%. So kung ikukumpara natin ito sa panahon ni President Duterte at Aquino, mas gugustuhin po natin ang panahon ni President Aquino at Duterte. Presyo at kita, inflation and GDP. Time of President Marcos, you have 16.2% inflation rate, but then the growth rate of the economy was 3.6%. President Aquino's time, 11.9% inflation. Again, bumaba ang taas ng presyo. But ang paglago ng ekonomiya, 3.4%. Bumagal ng konti. Nagbayad tayo ng utang, at dahil nagbayad tayo ng utang, medyo bumagal ang paglago ng ekonomiya. President Ramos' time, the inflation still went down, but the growth of the economy slightly increased, naging 3.9% GDP growth on average. And then, of course, the time of President Estrada, then President Arroyo, and then President Aquino, and the time of President Pinoy, inflation has gone down to 2.7%, but the growth rate is fastest at 6.2%. And then, time of Duterte, inflation is still it's relatively low, pero the growth rate has declined. It's the worst among these six presidents seen here. And in a sense, medyo hindi naman niya kasalanan. It's because, well, kasalanan po ng administration natin na nagkaroon tayo ng shortage ng rice, kasalanan natin na hindi natin naiwasan ang African swine fever, but the COVID and Ukraine war, hindi po natin maiwasan yan. Nevertheless, we experienced 30 years of growth and price stability starting from 1986 to 2016. Nakita po natin yung trend na bumababa ang inflation habang bumibilis ang paglago ng ekonomiya. Trabaho at utang. Employment to debt trade-off. 1986 to 1992, President Aquino sacrificed over 4% higher unemployment rate. So yung unemployment rate po sinacrifice ni President Corazon Aquino from 5.4% naging 9.7%. But then again, sinacrifice niya na yung utang natin nabawasan by we basically paid 700 billion pesos worth of debt, but at a cost that is 4% more inflation. Between President Marcos and President Pinoy, Marcos has the better combination. You would see here that this is President Pinoy. Mas mataas ng konti yung unemployment rate, 6.5 versus 5.4 during the President Benigno Aquino years, despite the fact that yung debt halos pareho lang at 3.7 trillion pesos. But may diferensya po ito. At the time of Marcos, he was the one, our government was actually borrowing. But during the President Aquino years, our government basically was paying the debt of previous administrations. Nagbabayad tayo ng utang na hiniram ng previous administrations. Trabaho at kita. Nung panahon po ni President Marcos, 3.6% ang growth, but unemployment rate was 5.4%. President Aquino, 3.4% growth. Again, nag-slow down ng growth, and unemployment also increased to 9.7%. President Ramos, slight improvement in both growth and employment. President Estrada was the worst in terms of we have ourselves here a 3.9% growth rate but 10.5% unemployment rate, double-digit unemployment rate. So isa sa 10 Pilipinong naghahanap ng trabaho kaya hindi makahanap ng trabaho. In President Arroyo years, and then President Aquino years, and then of course President Duterte, the President Benigno Aquino was the fastest growth of 6.2% GDP growth and 6.5% unemployment. Of course, President Duterte was a victim of COVID, so in that sense, the average GDP growth biglang bumagal at pinakamabagal sa lahat ng mga presidenteng napakita dito. But what you see here is that we have enjoyed 18 years of growth and inclusion from 1998 to 2016, starting with President Estrada up to President Aquino. That's 18 years na pagbaba ng unemployment at the same time pagbilis ng paglago ng ekonomiya. Huling-huli, kita at utang. Marcos has the highest debt to GDP ratio at 85%. What that means, ibig sabihin nun is kada 1 peso na per 1 peso na kinakitain natin, 85 centavos doon ay utang natin sa labas. Aquino borrowed to invest. So President Corazon Aquino basically humiram din siya, pero ang nangyari po ay lumago ang ekonomiya. Ang nasa brown po is nominal GDP at yung blue is actual debt. Yung panahon time of President Aquino, that the blue here is increasing, but you see here that the debt is also increasing, so that the debt to GDP ratio fell down to 56.6%. Of course, because of the Asian financial crisis, tumaas ulit ang debt to GDP ratio. Per 1 peso income that we have, 74 centavos is owed to in foreign debt. But we have had almost 20 years of more borrowing but faster GDP growth. Humihiram tayo, tumataas talagang utang natin, pero mas lalong lumalago ang ekonomiya, so that the GDP, the debt to GDP ratio has declined to 23.3%. That is over 20 years of hard achievement. Last March 26, invite din ako sa Philippine Leadership Society about character, competence, and purpose para sa halalan 2022. Or character or katangian, competence or kakayahan, at purpose o pakay. Meron bang dahilan? May mission ba ang ating kandidato? Before I proceed with that, we have two people here. They have the same face, but we have two people here. I talked about the competence to take the right path. Itong tao nasa kanan na to, President Duterte signs the law institutionalizing the 4Ps. He was competent enough at meron siyang pakay para makinig sa kanyang mga advisors at pinirmahan niya ang 4Ps. If you remember, during the start of his administration, there were actually calls from other senators and Congress people that we should get rid of the 4Ps. Pinakinggan niya ang advice ng kanyang mga economists next to him, and he signed the 4Ps. This person was not kung pakay lang ang pag-uusap, pakay, purpose. Ito, ang pakay nito is this person, if you allow me to use the analogy of Star Wars, this person took the dark path, and this person here on this side took the Jedi path, the path of competence, the path of sobriety. Then we speak about the character and humility to listen to scientists. Itong taong nasa kaliwang ito, hindi ito nakinig sa scientists. Itong taong nasa kanan natin, nakinig siya sa scientists at nagpa-vaccinate po siya. At ngayon, meron debate, ano po ba ang susunod nating source of energy? Is it renewables or is it nuclear? Now, let's listen to their candidates. Nakikinig pa sila sa advice ng scientists at ano ba ang sabi ng scientists? Should it be renewable or nuclear? So in the end, when you decide, when you listen to these news, let's draw the line between neutrality and false equivalence. There's neutral and objective, and this is neutral and objective. Because of the inflation right now, because of the Ukraine war, may man nagsasabi na dapat i-suspend ang excise tax sa gasolina. Pero meron din mga nagsasabing kandidato at mga iba pa na hindi natin dapat i-suspend ang excise tax, pero what we should do is magbigay tayo ng ayuda sa mga nangangailangan dahil sa pagtaas ng presyo ng gasolina. As an analyst, bilang botante, pakinggan natin ang debate and we should make our own conclusions. Objective conclusions. And that is being objective. This is false equivalency. Historians said that merong 6 million Jews na namatay nung Holocaust during World War II. Meron din mga nagsasabi, halimbawa mga Nazis, na the Holocaust did not happen and so very few innocent Jews died. Ano tayo? As an analyst, I will listen and debate with each other and make my conclusion. Pag ginawa po natin yan, ayun po ang tinatawag na false equivalency. Pag nasa tapat nyo ang puting pader, pag si Pedro sinabi na puti yung pader at sinabi ni Juan na itim ang pader, hindi po nyo iisipin at hindi kayo magdidebate na gray yung pader. Dahil kasinungalingan na sabihin na itim yung pader dahil kitang-kita nyo, puti naman, ayun ang katotohanan. False equivalency, pag ginawa nyo na sinabi nyo na baka nga gray at pakinggan natin magdebate ang dalawa. Ngayon, what about this? Ano po tawag natin dito? Neutral objective ba to or false equivalency? More than 2,000 people died or disappeared during the martial law. Very few, if any, died or disappeared during the martial law, ang sabi naman ng iba. So as an analyst or as a voter, pakinggan natin ang posisyon ng bawat isa at gumawa tayo ng objective na conclusion. Is that neutral or objective, or is that false equivalence? In conclusion, it's still your decision who you should vote. But please reflect. Do I objectively balance between fake and real news, or do I recognize the objectively balanced fake and real news is false equivalency? Pag nakita nyo na sinabi ng isa na ganito at ganyan, dapat ma-recognize natin na debatable ba to? O yung isa ba fake news at yung isa katotohanan, and therefore, there's no more room for debate, hindi tayo gigitna dahil alam natin ang katotohanan. Do I vote for someone who will follow the dark path or someone who will follow the sober path? Susundin ba natin si Darth Vader or susundin po ba natin ang mga Jedi? The way of the Jedi. And do I vote based on someone's omniscience and confidence or someone's knowledge and humility to listen to scientists? May mga iba dyan nagsasabi na ang galing-galing nila, na omniscient sila, alam na lang, they're all-knowing at very confident. Dapat lang, kung all-knowing sila, dapat lang maging confident sila. Pero meron din iba dyan na may kaalaman at merong kababaang loob para makinig sa mga scientists. Sana piliin natin yung pangalawa. So maraming salamat. This is PiTiK sa Utang Test.